Stephen Cooper is our first presenter, and he's going to be talking about planting a shade garden with Virginia natives. Stephen, are you ready?
I'm ready. Thank you, Shirley.
Okay.
And thank you all for attending today's virtual plant clinic. As a newly minted intern in the Green Spring Extension Master Gardener program, it's a real privilege to participate in this exchange of horticultural knowledge, botanical research, and individual experience. For the next few moments, I want to share fundamental gardening practices and planting principles for a shade garden using Virginia native plants to achieve beauty while protecting the environment and sustaining biodiversity of flora and fauna. Next chart, please. First, I'm going to set the context for our discussion by outlining how I describe shade gardening as more of a how-to rather than a what is. Then I'll quickly address fundamental gardening best practices applicable to all categories and types of gardens. Next, I'll outline 2 planting principles which address all 3 of our objectives to achieve beauty while protecting the environment and sustaining biodiversity. And finally, I'll expand on the value of using native plants when possible. Next, please. As I began my research for this presentation, I confess that I had the notion in my head that a shade garden was a discrete type of garden. So, as an intern does, I dutifully typed in, what is a shade garden, in the Virginia Cooperative Extension search engine. After reviewing several VCE publications, it became clear to me, shade garden does not describe a what. The term shade garden really describes a how. So the question really is, that we're going to address today, is how do I establish and maintain a garden in the shade? Shade is a straightforward term for a space sheltered from heat, light, and sun. But it now becomes the key environmental planning factor for our garden as we move forward, both from a planning and then a planting standpoint. At this point, I wanted to emphasize that throughout the rest of the presentation, you're going to see my heavy reliance on papers and publications from the Virginia Cooperative Extension website, and specifically on the Plant Nova Natives Guide entitled Native Plants for Northern Virginia. Both the VCE website and the Natives Plant Guide provide comprehensive and broad information on how to approach developing and planting a shade garden and using native plants where possible. Next chart. So let's start with the essential information that you need before planting a garden. And for the experienced gardeners and the master gardeners who I'm learning from every day, I beg your patience, but I know that I want to make sure that the essentials are reinforced for everyone. First, your soil type. Get your soil tested before adding anything other than mulch. Soils in Northern Virginia are quite variable due to geologic variability. Additionally, most of the topsoils removed during development leave behind a clay-rich subsoil. Soil testing will measure soil pH and major and micronutrient levels and make recommendations to correct any deficiencies. To have your soil tested, contact your county cooperative extension office or your local soil and water conservation district. Second, know what kind of soil you're dealing with in terms of moisture. Dry, moist, wet. Third, understand 2 things about light. First, what are the light requirements for the plant that you want to use in your shade garden. And then secondly, how much light is available based in the site where you intend to put your garden. So as you look at the chart and you see the light requirements, those are actually from the Native Plants Guide, and give you an idea of how to begin to plan your garden when it comes to light requirements and then light availability. The next step is planning. And I think I'd like to offer up that there's really two principles that we want to follow when we're in the initial stages of planting our garden. First, choose carefully. The underlying objective here is choosing the right plant for the right place. And to do that, ask yourself these questions. How do you plan to use the garden? What are the current site conditions? What plant species are most appropriate for the site and the geographic region you live in? Choose plants with species diversity in mind. Choose plants that sustain wildlife diversity to include pollinators, birds, vertebrates, and invertebrates. Choose plants that benefit the environment, that make for healthy air quality, good soil, clean water. Choose plants that function efficiently and aesthetically for our human use and well-being. At the same time, the efficiency part is that the plants help conserve energy, reduce waste, minimize, or at best eliminate our dependence on pesticides and fertilizers. And then finally, choose plants with year-round interest in mind. And this is where I really want to start foot stomping Virginia native plants. There are many sources where you can go to find Virginia native plants that are usable, that are suitable for shade gardening. But I'd like to offer up that before we start thinking in those terms, that we talk about the second principle of thinking vertically. Any garden, but specifically a shade garden, has the same fundamental characteristics as a home, a house. We have to think in terms of a ceiling, which we use trees for, a wall or walls, which we'll use shrubs for, and then a floor, which is where we take advantage of herbaceous ground cover in smaller plants. The key is, as we look at this chart, that in the guide for native plants for Northern Virginia, if you look very closely, I hope you can see that, but it is an encyclopedia of information that gives you the key characteristics of native plants at all three vertical levels: trees, shrubs, and ground cover, whether they're good in full sun, partial, or full shade, what kind of biodiversity they support, and if they are deer resistant. And if you look closely at those examples, you'll see those are right out of the Native Plant for Northern Virginia guide. And you can get this guide for free off of the website that you see at the bottom of the chart. Next chart. Let me go back. The question of why Northern Virginia natives. Well, like any good intern, I read the book, and then I took the three main topics out of the guidebook. And here's the message for everyone. As I read this book as part of my training, and then afterwards, as I started to plan my own wildlife habitat, this is a voluminous encyclopedia of information, and I'll be referring to this in some of the questions you had. But why do we use Virginia natives? It's simple: because they're beautiful, because they protect the environment, They are easier to maintain and save money. Now, they're not maintenance free, but they do decrease long-term maintenance requirements over time. As we mentioned earlier, protecting the environment, they reduce chemical loads, they use less water, and they are, in fact, a supporting part of biodiversity within Northern Virginia. Okay. So, in the short time we've spent today, I've tried to share with you 4 essential elements to start your planning for a shade garden. First, by outlining that shade gardening is a how to build a garden in shade, not what is a shade garden. Then reemphasize the key essentials for any garden: soil testing, understanding light requirements and availability, knowing what your plant hardiness zones are. And then finally, introducing and emphasizing how native plants are a near perfect fit for a shade garden that does in fact achieve beauty, protect the environment, and sustain biodiversity. I have provided some basic key references, soil sampling instructions, plant hardiness zones, and the website for the native plant for Northern Virginia plants, or the guide. I recommend getting that guide and downloading it to your computer, because for the fans of shade gardening, that is going to be one of the books that are going to be dog-eared and well used as you go through your planning and planting stages. And with that, I thank you for your patience and welcome any questions.
What native flowers, if any, can I plant in a completely forested area on my property?
That's a very good question. I think before we can answer that, we have to narrow it down to what part of the vertical architecture are we talking about. You say native flowers, are we talking about ground cover, flowering plants, shrubs? So from the base of the question, I'm thinking that flowers or ground cover. The answer is there are a lot. And if I could, maybe point everyone again and foot stomp the value of the guide for native plants in Northern Virginia. That guide literally will give you the answers to what you're looking for. If you know what you're looking for, trees, shrubs, or herbaceous plants, what kind of light do you have? It will tell you exactly what plants at what level will grow in full shade. Now, as an intern, I am happy to go through and compile a list of native flowers that would do well in completely forested areas and provide that through the master gardeners to you.
That would be great.
I would like that.
And we could send it to everybody that was in the presentation today.
Right.
Do any of you know what that's a picture of? Can you see the picture of the plant?
That would be terrific.
No, I don't know. I don't know what it is.
Oh, there are 2 names for it. We grow this at the Wolf Trap Garden. And I've always known it as a lizard's tail. It is also called a gooseneck loosestrife. Loosestrife, thank you. I need all the help I can get today. It is a very pretty flowering plant. It grows near a stream in the Wolf Trap Garden. And so I've always thought it needed wet soil. And when I looked it up, it said it's happy in dry soil also. So it doesn't have to be planted near a stream, but it blooms like this in the middle of the summer. And children love this plant. when we do a tour for children, I tell them to look for a plant that has a lizard's body part. And I think of it as a lizard's tail. There's so many really nice blooming plants like Helleborus, which is also known as winter rose, that loves shade, deep shade. It will grow and flower nicely in deep shade. Astilbe has beautiful flowers on it and does well in the shade.